The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are the speaker's own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of Atlas Chiropractic Center of Escanaba, Michigan, Largent Media, or any of their affiliates or subsidiaries. The material and information presented in this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Should you need medical attention or advice, seek out a licensed medical professional or facility in your area. The Tapping Into Uncomfortable with Reed Hubert DC name and all forms and abbreviations are the property of its owner, and its use does not imply endorsement of or opposition to any specific organization, product, or service.
Well, hello. Welcome to number 3 of these podcasts, which we're going to talk today a lot about trauma and how that affects the human body. But as always, we always give a moment of silence for the riff, and we wait for it. We anticipate it. This is my nod to a little bit of heavy metal and grunge. Oh, yeah, that's how we get this started. So let's talk about this. What does this have to do with anything? Well, on June 18th, we're actually releasing the book. That's why we're doing these podcasts. What we want you to do is buy the book and learn a lot more from the podcast of that which I cannot put in the book. So this is Tapping Into Uncomfortable, the podcast 15 to 20 minutes to meet your attention span. Our goal here is actually to make you think, to make you a little bit wiser when you're making health decisions. Because what I'm seeing in my office over the last 27 years is lack of information, or we're using this excessive information all wrong. So what I was able to do after 28 years is to write a book on some concepts of the coming out. I always tell people when it comes to information, I don't want you at the top of the funnel. I want you at the bottom. So we took it, strained it all down, and it's 4 causes. So we did thoughts, toxins, and now trauma. Trauma by far is the easiest things for people to understand, but we're going to tell you something that's absolutely going to blow up your brain.
Trauma, folks, is the number 4 killer of Americans. In fact, you have heart disease is number 1, cancer is number 2, number 3 is COVID-19, and number 4, sitting strong, and it's been there in the top 10 the whole time, is trauma. These are your accidents. These are the things you do to yourself. The scariest and saddest thing about this, it's number 1 killer of 15 to 25-year-olds, and I hope the stat will go down someday. So trauma is a big thing. It's one of those things that stands on its own. You get it? So how do you take care of yourself? Now, the trauma I'm going to talk to you is we're not going to talk about like you got in a bad car accident and you're all beat up. Part of that we're going to talk about. What I'm talking about is the small repetition, conscious things that you're constantly doing to yourself. So how do you take care of yourself? Number 1, you need good, positive movement, stretching, and good, positive thoughts. Number 2, this one I want you to stick with you. This is what I call the Goldilocks theory. What we want you to do with trauma in the small amounts is we want your body to adapt properly before it goes into the damage zone. So Goldilocks and the 3 little bears, too hot, too cold, just right. When you're dealing with trauma repetitive in your life consistently, not the big ones that most of the time you can't control, I want you to use the Goldilocks theory. Finally, the most important thing for you, trauma, toxins, the whole thing, this is where I've been saving this, is rest and repair. Runners, please, I beg you, as you're young, put rest and repair in your week. This is sleep, good water, nutrition, decrease mental stress, do something else for your mind when you're not running. Use the other T's positively to your advantage. This also applies across the board with toxins, thoughts. Give yourself a chance to heal. Very important.
This is the home of intellectual encephalitis. So what we want to do is to take your brain. So here's what we're going to do. Are you ready? This is what I want you to get from trauma. If you don't have it, you don't have it. You are not a starfish. If you lose your arm, you're not getting it back. That's what I want you to know about trauma. It's the physical injuries that you put to your body that can cause chemistry changes permanently, scarring, all that stuff. That can be a cause of disease or disorders. And we're going to talk about a couple of those today. So trauma, that was the big killer of our ancestors. We're supposed to be running away from the saber-toothed tiger, not getting eaten by the saber-toothed tiger. But you actually watch what actually happened after the Industrial Revolution, after we started getting heating in our homes, and after we started getting vaccinations, and we started getting running water, and we got all the comforts of wealth. And I'm not knocking that, by the way. Something happened to the human body. So instead of chopping our wood, we had it delivered. Instead of stacking our wood, we had somebody else do it. Instead of putting wood in the stove with our wealth, somebody else did it for us. What do you think that did to the human body? What actually happens with resilience in all four categories? It's very important. Resilience causes adaptation. So I always tell everybody what you need is you need good stress. Trauma is excessive stress either over time or one big major impact. So let's talk about it. So let's give you some examples of trauma that you probably weren't aware of. Let's talk about crazy soccer moms, right? Well, maybe they're not crazy for a reason, because soccer, what they're finding out is the headers that your kids do, you don't even think about. So how many times your kid's head hit a soccer ball doesn't cause a concussion. It hasn't gotten to that level to where it traumatized the brain or the neck. What it does do is we have found out through scientific studies that it actually causes changes in the brain. So imagine your kid doing a header, goes back out in a game. No big deal, right? Because it's a header. That's what we do. We're not supposed to use our arms. We use our head. Scientific studies are showing that it's actually starting to harm our brain. Now, take that header once. Now your kid's pretty good, uses his head a lot, right? Or her head a lot. Now do it thousands of times. Here's the thing about trauma to the brain, folks. It may not show up until later. We don't have the scientific studies yet to determine if trauma heavily causes big metabolic disorders like cancer, but I'm here to tell you we haven't done enough studies on it, and I actually think we do. I don't think we can take somebody who got hurt back in 1964, a particular thing, and then by 1994, oh yeah, there it is. We found that. That's why they don't really correlate that. But the one thing I'm talking about when it comes to trauma is I'm totally talking physical trauma. I do not, nor will I, get into the mental trauma, because right now we are so traumatized, I don't even want to talk about it. We can talk about how to build resilience as I did in the first time, but we're going to stick totally when we talk about a T that causes sickness or disease, trauma. Those are your open wounds, your gaping wounds. Those are the trauma that you do to your body. So it is so simple and so self-forward that if you hurt yourself and you don't have it anymore, you don't have it. I get on my runners at my office. Here's the reason why. You're young, you're tearing it up. Running does something to the brain. And I think what it does is you do mind over matter until you run out of matter. I put that in my book, by the way, because what I want you to understand is what you do now to your body doesn't go away. Now, remember that. It doesn't go away. The best thing when it comes to trauma, folks, moderation. Goldilocks theory. You need a little bit for your body to have some resilience, get a little bit stronger, but you sure don't need a lot. And I question you with this. You want to talk about the perfection of the human body. Think about what would happen if you didn't wear gloves and you raked the yard. What would happen? You get some blisters. But what if you kept raking and you did it every day? What would happen to those blisters after you were bleeding and were a mess for a good week or two? They would turn into calluses. That, my friends, is adaptation at work. One fascinating thing I want to bring you to how all the T's work together is I want to demonstrate that trauma can be caused by genetics. Oh my gosh, what are you talking about? Hey, check this out. So there are people in the world that can put on, I call them flying squirrel suits. They're gliding suits, where they'll jump out of planes and jump off of mountains and they'll glide down. What they're finding with these folks is their brain needs so much physical input into their brain so that they feel alive, so that it's actually a challenge. Because the stuff like you and I, we go on roller coasters, our brain lights up and says, wow, that was really thrilling. That was really cool. Theirs won't even light up. So when I tell people that you have these free climbers and they're doing some amazing things, that because of their brains need that excessive stimulation, sometimes it leads to excess trauma. So that's how this works also. And burns, all that good physical stuff and what it can do. Because there's not a person alive whose body right now, let's say you're 25 years old, was the same as when you got it. So one of the diagnoses is that the brain does that affects the body is called body integrity dysphoria. What that is the human brain tells these people that my right hand is not part of my body. It is foreign. I hate it. I don't like it. And it goes on for days, years, decades. And these people will feel better if they're amputated. Once that right hand may be amputated, the body integrity dysphoria gets better or goes away. Amazing, isn't it? Number 2 that you really need to know about, it's going to impact our society, and we, the people, are going to have to figure out how to deal with the eye. Number 2 is called transability. Transability means you want to be thought of as being disabled. So there's nothing physically wrong. You have 10 fingers and 10 toes, but you choose to be in a wheelchair. You choose to walk with a walker or a cane or a limp, and it makes you feel whole. What I see a lot in my office and things that are really starting to go through the roof, what I'm seeing is physical trauma causing disability and people unable to work. So if we're going to accept people for transability, are we then going to say that they're disabled and that they get a paycheck for the rest of their life? Fascinating concept. You might think that doesn't work, but the day is going to come, folks, where you are going to hear about transability.
Finally, and last but not least, this is a very long answer. This is the answer to our vaccinations toxins on the previous time to think. Now, what's cool about that is, what do you think? I'll tell you here in a second or two, or maybe a minute or two, but what do you think? We just talked about toxins. We talked about thoughts. We talked about, about genetic expression. We did touch on that a little bit. But what do you think? I purposely baited every one of you into a fight. I purposely wanted to put you in a state that you were going to stay in your yard and you were going to poke fun at the other person. And because of me, because of my degree, I know what he's going to say. Now, I need you to vaccinate your mind. When I say vaccinate your mind, what I want you to do is be conscious of things that are coming. And the reason I baited you on this is if you stay where you're at all the time and you never move, you're not going to learn a thing. Second reason I did that. Folks, in November is an election. What they're going to do for your votes by messing with your mind, it's going to get brutal. And I need you to know that you are going to be baited. You are going to be taught. You are going to be fighting with your neighbor. You're going to be knowing stuff, and it has to stop now. What you have to do is consciously vaccinate your mind, sit back, chill for this election. It's very important. Okay? So, what is the answer to a vaccination's toxins? Vaccinations are 100% toxins. That's how they work. Vaccinations work. Can't scientifically deny that. So I saw so much nasty stuff after COVID, especially when these shots came out, things that weren't making sense. But it's believed that 80 to 85% of the people who passed, if they would have got a vaccination, especially our older folks, they'd still be living today. So vaccinations work. You can debate all the other stuff you want, but at the end of the day, you got to look at the stats. Can we do better? Oh, absolutely we can do better, but that wasn't the question. Vaccinations use the category of toxins. What I want you to do when you look at how beautiful your body is, you're absolutely amazing. Because look at what we taught you. When I taught you that you can have the quality of a toxin, quantity, and time. So look at a vaccination. What is it? First of all, they decrease the quality of or the severity of the bacteria or the viruses. And what they do is they either give you pieces, a little tiny bit of this, a little bit, a tiny bit of that. They give you a small amount of quantity. And then what else do? They do it over time, exactly reinforcing what toxins do in the body. It is unbelievable how beautiful the human body is. Once again, folks, this is another case of biological plagiarism. They took it, they figured it out, not fully, by the way, gave it back to you, and look how beautifully your body deals with this. Here's the problem I do have with vaccinations. Uh-oh. So some of you are disappointed. Some of you are now happy. What does he have a problem with? I have a problem with how they always put science ahead of the body. Science, biological, for the human body, is interpretation of the human body. We saw it with the weight loss drugs. You now see it with vaccinations. That's the problem I have. So you get a vaccination. What I want is the human body is so amazing. You are so beautiful. You are so fantastic that this is how this process works. Stop putting science ahead of the beauty of the human body. Start telling them how amazing you are. And look what happens. Some of the things that we're getting wrong is people are forgetting that I want to get a disease naturally. Sometimes getting a disease naturally means death. I want you to look up an absolutely remarkable person. He just died, I think, in the last 10 days. I want you to just punch up on the internet, polio patient 78. And you punch up an amazing man who's been living the majority, I think 72 years, in an iron lung. He's a better man than me. So how does this work? The one thing I told you about toxins is I gave you a piece of it. I said, anything that causes a chemical reaction, that robs you of health. That's partially true. Here's how it works. Your body is so amazing and so fantastic. 24/7, 7 days a week until the second that you pass away, it actually plays a fantastic health symphony where it knows where things are, tries to get everybody working together to make something really good. It's your internal resistance to internal or external things that come in. So when toxins first come into the body, your body looks at that and says, oh my gosh, we got an issue. Either I store it. If it keeps coming in, I need to get rid of it, or I need to chemically alter it, then store it or get rid of it. So when these toxins come in, your body grabs it and says, hey, I am going to get memory from this. And that's how vaccinations work. But if it wasn't for the beauty of the human body, they would not work. There is no difference between this inside, internal, and external. It's like a race car going around the track. There's two forces that work on that. There's a big thing when you're going around the circle called centripetal and centrifugal. One goes out, one goes in. That's what keeps the car on the track or going into a corner. Any slight variation at 200 plus miles an hour, they're either smashing into the wall or they're going into the pits. That's exactly what happens inside the human body. That's why it is so important for you to understand the 4 categories. It is so important for you to start to take care of yourself because that's how it works. So what you want to do is watch your body, especially with a cold. That toxin comes in, that virus, 90% of them are viruses, comes in, and within the first 1 to 4 days, you feel pretty miserable. Might have a low fever, you just don't feel good, you got brain fog, you're really quite affected by this. But what happens in the next 5 to 10 days? Your body starts to get rid of the fight that it just had. After you're done, your body's done with the infection. Now it's time for rest and repair. Got it? My friends, that's how beautiful and fantastic you are. And we need to respect that again.
All right, folks, this is my favorite time of the podcast, and this is called Time to Think. This is a spot where I want you, we'll answer it with the next one, which is traits, and then we'll have the 4 T's done. So as it comes to physical trauma, if you have 10 fingers and 10 toes, what's your excuse for not being able to do what you're capable of doing? So as always, I want you to be happy, I want you to be healthy, and I want you to just be.